Today I'm going to talk about. So how does this incentivizing grid connected solar farmers influencing the pumping behavior of farmers, right? So this is evidence from Surya Shakti Kisan Yojana in Gujarat, right? So next. Right. So as you know, right? So as you know, the groundwater, how much this groundwater sustainability is important for us. Right? So we are just talking on this groundwater sustainability from the last 2 days. So it is really very important to come out with the solutions that help in sustaining the groundwater extraction from the groundwater extraction, right? So we need some sustainable solutions. So as you know, we are talking a lot about the solar irrigation pumps, right? So there are many models that we have talked about in the last 2 days, but one, right? So that in this presentation, right? So I'll talk mainly on this grid connected solar pumps, right? So that is being a part of this SKY scheme. So next slide. So before going to grid, right? So before going to a discussion on the how this grid connected solar irrigation pumps affect pumping behavior, here I would like to present some recent evidence on what is the effect of off-grid solar irrigation on pumping behavior, right? So this literature is emerging, right? So here a paper by Ashita et al. 2000 found that positive impact of solar irrigation pumps on the average groundwater consumption, right? So this is our study where we found the total pumping hours as consequent to the solar irrigation pumps increased in Nepal. Next slide, please. Right. So this is a brief description of SKY scheme implemented in 2018 to provide farmers with a clean source of daytime energy for pumping groundwater in agriculture, as well as provide an additional source of income by selling excess solar energy to the grid. Right? So in terms of technical model, each farmer is provided a solar panel capacity of 1.25 times, so that it provides farmer a higher capacity and above their own consumption required, so that they can evacuate the excess electricity and earn income. And I'm just talking. Right. So in this scheme, SKY farmers receives 12 hours of a daytime power, while non-SKY farmers receive 8 hours of daytime power. Right. So in terms of financial model of this scheme, farmers need to pay 5% minimum upfront investment, and 30% is the subsidy from the government of India, and 65% loan to be provided to farmers. And the duration of that loan is 7 years. Next slide, please. So this slide tells, right, so the water situation in Gujarat is already in stress. So 1/4 tehsil blocks are already under water stress in Gujarat. Next slide, please. Right. So in terms of objective of this presentation, so basically here I'm focusing on how does incentivizing farmers influencing the pumping behavior of on-grid connected. There's a typo, right? So the grid connected solar farmers, in particular, we examine the growth in pumping time minutes for SKY consumers compared to the non-SKY consumers after the implementation of the scheme. So, and in terms of pathways to impact, so direct incentives to reduce water use, the transition from flat tariff to metered tariff provides an alternative income opportunity by selling electricity to the grid. Next slide, please. So these are the data sets that we are using. Right, so we are specifically focusing on 2 indicators: pumping time in terms of minutes and the energy consumed by pump. Right, so in the frequency of the data is 2019-20. This is the 3-year data: 2019-20, 2021, and 2021-2. And we have segregated by Rabi and Kharif season. Right, so we use both. Right, so in terms of our empirical framework, both balanced and unbalanced approach. Next slide, please. Right, so here we would like to estimate a simple econometric model here to analyze the differential growth in pumping hours and energy consumption for SKY vis-a-vis non-SKY consumers over the period 2019-20 and 2021-22. So this is the model. Right, so here the coefficient of interest is alpha 3. And how do we interpret that coefficient? So it measures the change in the growth of pumping time between SKY and non-sky farmers over the period between 2019-20 and 21-20. Next slide. So this is the distribution farmers by inverter capacity and contract. Next slide. Yeah. So these are the descriptive stats in terms of trends in pumping time minutes for Rabi season, right? So, and this is the data for 3 years. On the left-hand side, we have the numbers for non-sky farmers. On the right side, we have a number for sky farmers. Right? So if you look at the average yearly growth, so for non-sky farmers, 0.4%. And if you look for sky farmers, it's in negative, it's -3%. Next slide, please. Right, so, and here, so this is for the Kharif season. Here, the average yearly growth in pumping for non-sky farmer is 13%. However, for sky farmer is 10%, right? So these two descriptive evidence suggest that there is a higher growth for non-sky farmers vis-a-vis sky farmers in terms of pumping time. Next slide, please. So again, right, so we found a similar pattern of results when you look at the trends in energy consumption, right? Here for non-sky farmers, average yearly growth is -1%, and for sky farmers, it's -12%, right? So a greater reduction for sky farmers. Next slide, please. Next slide. Yeah. So, right, so here are the regression results. So we have used, so these are results on the based on the unbalanced panel, and here the coefficient of interest is sky interacted with time, right? So it tells you the differential rate in the growth of pumping minutes for sky farmers vis-a-vis non-sky farmers. If you would like and interested to see the growth in the sky growth in terms of pumping minute for sky farmers vis-a-vis non-sky farmers, then if you just add these two coefficients, that will give you the growth in pumping minutes for sky farmers.
For 2 minutes.
Yeah, so I understand, right? So, so for sky farmers here, we see a 10 percentage point decline in pumping time over the period, and for non-sky farmers, the rate of growth is 8%. Right? So the overall difference between sky and non-sky is -18 percentage points, and we found similar results for Kharif. Next. And this is for the energy consumption. Again, we found a similar story. So a priori, we expected that, right? So for so there is a 17 percentage point difference in the sky versus non-sky in terms of energy consumption over the period 2019-20 and 21. Next slide, please. So this is results from the balanced panel. So we find similar results as in terms of largely in terms of in terms of sign and the coefficient, although magnitude is here a bit higher than the unbalanced panel. Next slide, please. Yeah, next slide. Right. So in terms of the takeaway from this presentation, here our analysis provides suggestive evidence that groundwater extraction is not gone up for sky farmers, and in fact declined compared to the non-sky farmers. We emphasize that the grid-connected solar pumps and providing evacuation-based incentives are the key mechanism for these results. And if you look from the policy perspective, the grid-connected solar pumps with the corrective measures can serve as an important pathway for groundwater sustainability. Thank you.
Thank you, Deepak. This is probably the first very clear statement which great support for the hypothesis that advisory farmers for saving energy actually results in behavioral change. Thank you very much. We have Sonal is going to talk about the impact of sky on water markets.
Good morning. I'm talking
Sonal, you have
about
15 minutes.
yes, informal water markets and its the impact of sky. So that's what we are going to do. Next, please. So water markets in Anand, just to give you a brief idea, it is mainly groundwater based, but though there is canal irrigation, but it's not available everywhere. The norms of water buying and selling are already decided. Traditionally, historically, they have been already set. Underground field channels have been built mostly by sellers to sell water to their neighbors, etc. And apart from the economic factors, the non-economic factors are very important in this district. Next, please. So what would happen? There are various electricity supply and price regimes in Gujarat. It started with flat rates earlier we used to have. Then we started having metered rates depending on consumption. After that, in 2005-06, we had the Jyoti Gram Yojana, where we separated the agriculture and domestic feeders, and we had a promise of 8 hours uninterrupted supply. And 2018 Surya Shakti Kisan Yojana, that is the latest intervention as far as the water markets go. Next, please. The design of Sky we already know by now. I'm not going to repeat. 65% of loan, 30% subsidy, and 5% upfront to be paid. Now, this is a contract for 25 years. And for the first 7 years, there'll be a loan payback period. Subsequently, in the subsequent 18 years, the farmers are going to get 3.5 rupees per unit for the power that they evacuate to the grid. Yeah, next, please. So the research questions that I begin with is what is going to happen to the water price in the water market? You see, the solar power is already free and the groundwater is also free. Now we have under Sky 12 hours of electricity instead of 8 hours. So it's 1.5 times more electricity. What will happen to the withdrawal? Will this result in a lowering of the price of water because we have now more of everything? Or on the other hand, the design of the Sky says that the pumping has to be limited to 800 rupees, 800 units per SP per year. And so that's how we are going to limit. Only if you limit your pumping, then you can earn money. So does it mean that the sellers will try to limit their pumping, which means that they are going to increase the price of irrigation water? What will happen? Whether it will go up or it will go down? As per the economic factors. Apart from that, there are certain non-economic factors, as I said, the water markets and the water relations, buying, selling, price also, it's all, there are historical ties, social factors also influencing all this. So the non-economic factors would be more important in this market than the earlier economic factors. I'm trying to understand what is more important, what is more, going to influence these markets. Next, please. So I've studied 3 feeders of the MGVCL, the Madhya Gujarat Beach Company. It is in the Petlat subdivision, then Ashapuri, Ishnav, and Trambowad. And because one feeder typically has more than 1 villages, so there are 5 villages and 3 feeders, Sky feeders. Yes, please. Next. So geographical features, there is this Mahi Right Bank Canal network over here. But the canal is not the canal water is not available everywhere. It's only available in parts of the Trambowad feeder. Cropping pattern is based mainly in tobacco and paddy and pearl millet and also wheat. And also they have a tradition of growing fodder crops because even animal husbandry is very prevalent in these areas. Next, please. So implementation of Sky, we already know that the feeders were converted feeder. So regular feeder converted into Sky feeder only if at least 70% of the agricultural connections agreed to install Sky. Then those who did not agree, which is the rest of the 30%, watchdog transformers were attached to them so that their electricity consumption would be regulated. So Sky gets 12-hour supply and non-Sky gets 8 hours of electricity supply. Empaneled forms for installation here is Mundra Solar and Vari and HKRP have been empaneled for the maintenance of the solar panel. So there are 2, this thing. Farmers' responsibility to report any damage which might have occurred to the panel, and the company is supposed to repair it within 48 hours, but we have been told that doesn't really happen. They've been provided with a user-friendly mobile app in Gujarati, and the farmers find it very useful in monitoring their day-to-day production and consumption. Thank you. Next, please. So we are, I was attempting the qualitative research where I basically go to farmers and talk to them about and come out with their expressions, their ideas, their opinions that they have expressed. So I'm not, some quantitative information was collected, but I was focusing more on the qualitative aspects of their experience with Sky. So the patterns which emerged, we have coded and we have grouped and regrouped and finally we have tried to find out some logical interpretation of this. Next, please. Yeah, so these are the total connections. Ashapuri has the least number, 32. Ishnav and Trambovard have about more than 80, 197 sky connections in these 3 feeders, and the non-sky connections are 55. Next, please. So I started with in 2 phases. We first did some key informant interviews. So we took 2 key informants from each feeder. That makes a sample size of 6. Now, who are these key informants? They were selected purposely so that they are about 60 years of age, having an experience of about 25 to 30 years in farming, and they were also simultaneously water buyers and water sellers. So since in one parcel they would be buying water, and the other parcel they would be selling. So they have basically an experience in both the sides. And we took an unstructured list of questions basically for discussions, and people, they responded based on their memory, experiences and insights. Next, please. For the data collection on Sky, we have taken total 49 Sky sellers and 6 non-Sky sellers, and we also took buyers, total 36 buyers who bought water from Sky sellers. Next, please. Yeah. So the key informant interviews, they basically gave us an insight on the irrigation infrastructure. In 1950s, they were open wells and bullocks used to carry water, they said. And then, flow irrigation is usually practiced over here. Then Mahi phase 1 canal network was completed in 1958. After that, we had the irrigation was expanded. Diesel engines became popular. 3 agricultural seasons also became popular during this time. In the 1970s onwards, electrification happened. So more tube wells now and more area under irrigation. 1980s saw the advent of submersible pumps, which were costlier, but they saved water and time of irrigation. Currently, only PVC pipes are laid out. Now they have done away with the cement pipes, and all farmers owning tube wells are also selling water. And each and every farmer has a secure arrangement for source of irrigation. So diesel pumps have become redundant, I'm told, in this area. Next, please. Water markets, earlier we said there was a flat rate regime, then there was a metered regime. Finally, we had the Jyotigram Yojana, with 8 hours assured electricity. And then the water rates also, they subsequently increased with all these regimes. And yeah, the major reason for selling water here is not merely to earn income, but to maintain the social ties. And also because you have many parcels of land, so at one parcel you want to buy water, so in the other parcel you will have to sell it. Unless you sell, you cannot buy. So that kind of an arrangement is there. The caste dominant here is the Patel caste, which is dominating in Ishnav and Ashapuri, while in Trambovard we have more Kshatriyas here. Next, please. So the groundwater table earlier in the 1930s, I'm told that it was a good level, 15 to 20 feet, and then it started reducing, and currently we have on an average around 60 to 65 feet of groundwater, with the exception of Trambovard, where the canal is close by. Okay, next, please. Yeah, so yeah, please, next, please. So why do the farmers adopt Sky? They have adopted because the subsidy was an attractive thing. Upfront investment was very low, and the loan was arranged for those who could not afford even this 5%. They were expecting additional income, and again, 12-hour electricity was a major issue, why they major attraction for them. Yeah, the next, please. Why do they sell water? Additional income is, of course, it is a reason, but the major reason was they wanted to help the extended family members and relatives who are neighboring to them, and they need to sell water. You cannot, even if you don't get money. So money is not the major thing. It's the maintaining of social ties are more important, why they would want to sell water. Next, please. Major reasons why farmers don't sell water. Farmers with new Sky connections, they do not have intergenerational relations, so they are not having those obligations, so they can easily refuse to sell water. So they are the ones who will not sell. Others will have to sell. They are kind of bound to sell. Water rates could be increased notionally, but they are not actually realized. What is the rate quoted is not actually realized, but because the buyer is a relative, so he will then negotiate. It's difficult to really, to recover the amount. You might quote the price, but the price actually is not realized in the market. Water selling cannot be stopped because how could we stop it? And what they do is they reduce the number of irrigation. They said instead of five irrigations, I'll give you 3 and so on. So that's how they are doing. Major reasons why people did not opt for Sky, mostly because of the land ownership and land records not being correct. I mean, not being appropriate. So they could not get the connection. Otherwise, they would have loved to get it, they said. And sometimes the land is in more than one parcel. So on one parcel you have the Sky connection, on the other parcel you are not having it, and so you are buying water. So like
1 minute.
yes, please. Next. What do the Sky sellers think about JGY versus Sky? They saying JGY was better because it was cheaper and it was also beneficial for the tobacco crop, because tobacco is watered in at night, and that apparently does well for the crop. So of course it is convenient. Daytime irrigation is convenient, but JGY was more convenient because we could have nighttime irrigation. Next, please. What happened immediately after Sky? They were delighted that now they got free power, increased hours of supply, more convenience. What happened next? Next, please. What happened after they began to receive payable bills? Now they were suddenly shocked and they could not stop selling water, so they didn't know what to do, but they did not pay their electricity bills. Next, please. What happened after 2 years? Sky, that is around 2020. Now they were forced to increase the water rates. So they increased, but they realized that the buyers are going to suffer. So it could, and the relatives and neighbors cannot be, you can't do anything much about it. So they did increase as such. Again, they decided not to pay. So for 2 years, they were not paying. The bills used to come, they would not pay. Next, please. Water markets after 3 years. Now the realization has dawned that they will have to curtail their pumping because this cannot go on forever. So they decided that what do we do about it? So they did not stop selling water, but indiscriminate water selling was not done. They would only sell to their immediate neighbors or close relatives, not to anybody else. They also learned the techniques of cleaning and upkeeping of their solar panels so that they increased their production. But however, most water sellers still did not pay their bills. Next. So water price has, during flat rate connection, it was on 20 to 30, metered connection 40 rupees per hour, JGY 40 to 55. Immediately after Sky, it was 40. So it came down. Then after receiving payable bills, 50 to 60, then 80 to 110, and currently it is 120 to 130 rupees per hour. Yeah, so that's how the price has increased. But as I said, the price may be notional, it may not be actually recovered. Next, please. Yeah, what about the experiences? There are most people who are net consumers, 34 of them are net consumers. Initially, they received payable bills, but now they are receiving income. So there are 7 people who have turned around. Initially, they were net consumers. Now they have converted into net producers. So yeah, next. So they have various ways in which they are going to combat this. They are not going to pay. Many people think they will never pay. Let the government do whatever they want. I'm not going to pay. So all those things. What do the buyers think about Sky? They are finding it advantageous because of the convenience of nighttime irrigation. Also because the irrigation hours have expanded, 12 hours now. So they get more priority. They get water when they want it. Earlier when it was curtailed, only 8 hours. That time they had to wait for a longer time for it. Now that is not the case. Disadvantages of Sky. Water rates have increased greatly. That is there. They are saying if the sellers are not paying their bills, then why are they asking us to pay more? If they are paying, then we would have also paid. They are not paying their bills and still they are asking us to pay a higher price, which is unfair. That's what they are saying. Other options cannot be. Sometimes there are no options. Sometimes the canal water is not available. So, and then there are social ties in buying also. If you don't buy, then also you have a problem. Next, please. Yeah, why don't they get their own Sky connection? Because of various reasons, mainly because the connections are not forthcoming. Not everybody is able to get connections when they want. So that's how they don't buy the sky, their own sky. Next, please. Yeah, so conclusion, sky has had varied impact on various stakeholders. Some aspects are good, some aspects are not good. The impact of sky on groundwater tables could not be ascertained, but certainly we need to take all these into consideration while designing the policy. Thank you so much.
So sorry to have to rush you, but I think this is a, earlier about sky, there is some linear hypothesis that when you start paying farmers for electricity, the automatic thing will be to change at the bottom line. But I think Sonal's presentation shows that things are more complicated than this plain microeconomics. There's an element of moral economy in work. Okay. Thanks very much. Hippu. Another very interesting presentation. There is hardly any discussion so far about a new way of solarizing agriculture that is taking place in Maharashtra.
Yeah,
And
sure.
Hippu is presenting an assessment of that. Hippu comes from Irma.
Thank you.
15 minutes.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Professor Tushaar Shah and Archisman and also IWMI for this opportunity. So this is, as Professor Tushaar has already mentioned, this is something which has been understudied from the very fact that you might have so many presentations on sky so far, but then there is hardly any work on the MSKVY, that is Mukhyamantri. Mukhyamantri is called Chief Minister. So Mukhyamantri Saura Krishi Vahini Yojana, MSKVY Yojana, that is in place in Maharashtra. Next slide, please. Yeah, so just to give a context of the study, as we know, India's electrification policy was towards energizing, rural electrification policy is towards energizing the pump sets. It is evident because the very basic definition of rural electrification or the village electrification, as even today, says that village is electrified, only 10% households having electricity connection, the village is called electrified. Even if you go back in time in 1997, there was a definition that electricity is used in anywhere in the revenue boundary of the village, used for whatsoever purpose, the village used to be called electrified. So that means that inhabited locality also clause was missing. I mean, that was only introduced in 1997. So that means 50 years after independence, we realized that we need electricity for the household. So nevertheless, so this project is about energizing agriculture. So in that sense, our policy was towards that. And agriculture consumes 24% of India's electricity as per the latest data. And obviously, as you can see from the figure, the average cost of supply in our country is above 6 rupees per unit to agriculture, whereas average revenue from the agriculture is just 1 rupee. So that basically is showing the kind of heavy subsidy that the discoms are facing, and that is deteriorating their financial health. And given this, and coupled with solar has become cheaper, affordable, etc., so that we see the scope for solar. So if you look at Maharashtra in particular, so in Maharashtra, as you see, the figures are slightly aggravated in the sense the agriculture share from MSEDCL, which actually supplies 85% of the total state electricity, distributes 85% of the total state electricity. Rest 15% is with 3 distribution agencies, but they are confined to Mumbai. So that's how mostly 100% electricity is from the MSEDCL, which is 30% to the agriculture. And if you see this, the cost difference between supply and the revenue, it is actually more skewed in case of Maharashtra, and therefore Maharashtra distribution company actually suffers from. Yes, sure. So Maharashtra actually suffers from a bigger loss as far as the the gap between the cost of supply and the revenue is concerned. Yeah. So this is, if you see, how do we overcome this gap? One is obviously you provide subsidy to the agriculture, which is quite high, as we saw in the previous slide, more than 10,000 crores for Maharashtra. But then the other option is to basically cross subsidize. And as you see, the cross subsidy that is there in Maharashtra, the charge that is for agriculture, tariff for the domestic and industrial and commercial it's quite skewed. That means industrial and commercial entity are doing the cross subsidization in case of Maharashtra, and which is also slightly more in proportion compared to the all, if you take the state, all India average. All India average, the prices are not that skewed. As you can see in the second row of the table, tells about the all India average. So this high payment by industry and commercial entity, of course, will make Maharashtra, and over the time, it will, make it less attractive for the investment. And Maharashtra has also is a very significant case in context of solarization of agriculture, because it has the density of electric pumps is approximately 1/5 of the country's pump. If you compare that with number of farmers or even land area number of farmers vary around 10 to 15%. So therefore the financial distress faced by the distribution company forces it to provide nighttime electricity, which becomes inconvenient to the farmers. And that obviously, this audience knows that leads to overexploitation of the groundwater. And obviously the way out is provision of cheaper solar, low cost local daytime power supply to the agriculture. Yeah. So when we talk about solarization of agriculture, there are three pathways essentially. So one is you have solar pumps, which is mostly for the off-grid areas. The other is like the Sky scheme, where you have farm level solar installation, where you continue with the electric pumps. And the third option, which Maharashtra has adopted, is the option where you have solarization at the feeder level. And if you see, compared to the first two, the third option on paper looks very nice, because here you don't have to deal with individual farmers, and you are basically, deployment of solar is happening through private players. So that is, private investment is coming to the solar, and no cumbersome documentation exercises, and no system maintenance burden to the farmer, because that is also one of the reasons what we see in the remote rural areas, systems becoming dysfunctional. So that risk is very less. The security of the system. Sure. So farmers can adopt this. So basically, as you see, the farmers would be treated in this particular scheme as consumers, in the sense they would be like we urbanites. When we switch on this room, we don't know where the power is coming from, whether it is coming from hydro, solar, nuclear, etc. We don't know, and we are supposed not to know, because we should be treated as consumers, where we use the electricity and pay for it. So something similar, where the farmers continue to use their same pump with the status quo, and pay for their So this basically this particular study supported by IWMI, we got it at IRMA, and basically the idea was to make a quick assessment of this MSKVY scheme in Maharashtra. Can you go to the next slide, please? Yeah, so we had a set of research questions. We started very ambitiously to basically ascertain the physical and the financial progress. So there are certain objectives or assumptions associated with the MSKVY scheme, that it would lead to, as I was saying, deployment of solar through private investment. And also we wanted to know what has been the constraints and bottlenecks around that, and how the farmers have been benefited, and lastly, whether it has impact on the groundwater. So what methodology we followed? Of course, we looked at various government documents, and the sources of the documents was, Maharashtra Electricity Regulatory Commission documents was the largest source. Of course, we had access to a few contract documents, and also some of the research papers and the reports. And we had discussion with all these stakeholders. Locally they called Mahadiscom, that is basically MSETCL, and Mahagenco. This is basically respectively the distribution and the generation companies. And the EESL, which actually is as a government enterprise, has gone into MOU with both these agencies. I will come to that in a moment. And the private player and talent solar operators. And we also conducted a preliminary survey at the village level with the farmers. We chose 7 districts out of the 6 administrative divisions of Maharashtra, and then this 280 farmers. That means roughly 40 farmers from each district. And we have some FGDs and discussion with the village heads and Pradhan. So this is the circles are basically the districts which we chose for our study. As you can see, the map of Maharashtra is on the left, which has with its 6 administrative divisions. And on this, the 6 districts which you have chosen, the number of solar units and the number of farmers which you have selected. This is the farmers profile, and this is mostly, you can say this is not actually pure random survey, because it was not possible, because it was conducted during COVID time. It was more like an availability sampling. Of course, we chose the districts as per the logistics as well as kind of installation those districts have. So that is kind of a purposive sampling, but the farmers level, it is mostly an availability sampling. And as you can see in our profiling, the marginal and the small farmers dominate, and followed by the semi medium, and the large farmers. So that is basically the pie chart for that. So the objective, as I was saying, it has been clearly stated by the government, various government documents, as well as MSKVY website, that this is basically solarizing the agricultural line, reducing the revenue losses, because the MSEDCL, the distribution company, is supposed to gain most in this process, saving traditional power supply, as we saw the gap, the reduced cross subsidy, and providing daytime agricultural load, and thereby improving the trust factor. Improving the trust factor of the distribution company with the farmers, and satisfaction of the farmers, reduce the T&D losses, because you are generating power at the consumption end, that actually balances the system as well, and helpful in fulfilling the RPO targets. Please. This is actually initially the generation company was roped in, but then subsequently the distribution company was also roped in to facilitate this project. And these are typically 0.3 to 10 megawatt plant within 5 kilometers of area of agricultural load dominated. And per taluka, they will go for 20 megawatt. Per district, they can go up to 100 megawatt. The project will be developed by private players. So and also the evacuation of power will be responsible of the distribution company. Next slide. Yeah, so this is kind of a heart of that scheme. I hope the arrows are visible. As you can see, there are two implementation partners here: the distribution company and the generation company. That is in Maharashtra. That is the public utilities, and they would basically execute this scheme through two routes. One is bidding route, with the private players, and the second one is with the MOU route. The MOU route was initiated to give an initial push to the project, but by norm, everywhere they kept on mentioning, even till date, that the bidding route would be the default route. And once they have a reverse auction method bidding for the private players, obviously the private players themselves will install the plant, or they will maybe offload that activity to another private agencies. Similarly, in the MOU route, the ESL, that is the government enterprise, they will, they basically again go for bidding to have installation at the tail end by some private agency. So this is basically, and the operation and maintenance would be by the installer or operational maintenance. So for example, in the ESL plant, the ESL owns those plants, but then the O&M is basically given to the responsibility of O&M is the tail end private player. Yeah. So this is basically the five. Sorry. Can you go to the previous slide? Yeah. So sorry. So this is the four routes I explained, because two implementation partners and two routes. So that makes it permutation 4 combination. But there is a fifth one also, because the generation company itself, being the generation company, they themselves can install the plant through some private agency. So that is, as you can see in the bottom, there is an arrow from the MSPGCL to the ONM. Yeah. Yeah, sure. So this has been the progress. As you can see, the approval was for 5,000 megawatt, but then compared to the approval, we have achieved something, close to little above 700 megawatt. And this is, roughly 15% of the initial target. Yeah. Next slide. And if you see these 5 routes, how much of being achieved through these 5 routes, as you can see, this is the distribution. Yeah. And this is basically how the distribution is across the districts of Maharashtra. This is basically from the bidding route. Next slide, please. This is the earlier one is, but the bidding route done by private players from the MSEDCL, that is distribution company. But this is by the generation company, bidding route again. Next. Yeah, this is the MOU route, where both, the distribution company as well as generation company, they have gone in MOU with the ESL to give the initial push to the project. Yeah, next. Yeah. So if we look at, some of the nuances, what has happened in the project, one of that is in the ESL project, as you can see, there are projects that happened in the first phase, but the second phase progress has not happened. Then the ESL has gone in agreement with the distribution company as well as the generation company, and there has been projects on hold, and it has been on hold because the reason one is that, the COVID has actually disrupted the prices and, the supply chain of the material coming. And also in the initial stage, obviously responsibility of land was with the distribution company, because as you might know, the distribution company, the transmission company, the generation company, they might have spare land. So those spare land were used for, getting this project done, but subsequently those low-hanging fruits were not available and land availability became a concern, and that actually has resulted in slow progress of the scheme. Yeah. So so if you see as far as attracting the private investment, so this is the statistics about that, the 29 private players, 50 units, etc. Next slide. Yeah. So one constraint, as you can see, is the constraint relating to the price. As you can see, this particular scheme, the prices started with 2.94 rupees per unit to have gone up to 3.3 rupees per unit. And this, by any way, this is a highly competitive price, even declared more than many times by MERC itself. So which is actually, with that kind of tariff rate, obviously because of the COVID, as we see, the cost has escalated almost 30%, 30-35% for the material that is coming from certain countries. And then obviously the safeguard duty which has been imposed recently, that safeguard duty, which was earlier imposed, that was replaced by basic custom duty, which is actually 40%. So this duty increase is also affected the cost, as well as the GST. As you know, the solar systems are under GST. So initially it was 5%, but it was increased to 12% in 2021, and subsequently, if solar is provided as a service, it is 18%. So that way, the installation cost has actually increased. Next. So this is, I have already mentioned about the land problem. The solution to this land problem is basically being attempted by creating can you go to the next slide? Yeah, by creating a land bank portal where the farmers can offer land in lease. And in this case, the distribution company would be in charge, where they basically, give the rent to the farmers, which is 30,000 per month per acre per year. And that basically they deduct the payment from the private player and they pay the farmers first, and then the rest they pay to the private player. But this has been a very recent initiative, and it is premature to know whether it is successful or not. Next slide, please. Yeah. So as far as the daytime supply of 8 hours, which has been one of the assumptions in the project, is concerned, this particular thing, as you can see, we collected data from one of the feeder, and as you see, the daytime supply has actually reduced. Okay, for that particular feeder data, whereas the survey data shows there has been an overall increase, but that also there is variation in terms of district wise. And this particular thing I just want to explain, because that might be in the expected line, because what has both the survey as well as the stakeholder interaction shows that there is a voltage quality has improved, and when the voltage quality improves, then obviously with less supply you can achieve the irrigation need. So that may be one of the reasons for which but this is for just from one feeder, so we have not done the study for other feeders, which actually we didn't have the time or the scope to do that. Yeah. So so if you see this, obviously reduction of P&D losses, RPO target is 700 megawatt is too less to have an impact on those. Next slide, please. And if you see, can we go to the next slide? So this is basically previous slide. So this basically shows in terms of the supply of electricity that is the farmers are getting, and as you can see, there is more towards more amount of supply. After, so this pre-MSKVY, post-MSKVY. Next slide. And the distribution, as I was saying, for supply, actually the availability sampling we did, maybe the ones who got the benefit, we sampled them more, and that is the reason we see a positive in terms of supply hour increase. Next slide. Yeah. So in terms of scheduled load shedding, there is a reduction. There is a reduction of scheduled load shedding, which is also an expected outcome of this project. Next. Yeah. So if you see the load shedding again, district wise, this is the situation. It is not that everywhere it increased. There was some district where it is, sorry, everywhere it decreased. In some district there has been an increase also. Next. Yeah. So yes, next please. There is no next slide. Next. It's not going to move here. Excuse me. Okay. Nevertheless, for the interest of time, so this study is basically, if you see, this is a preliminary study, and there is a lot of future scope. We actually conducted a financial analysis also, and the financial analysis clearly showed that the distribution company is the one which is benefiting the most. And obviously, so they are obviously therefore interested, but the profitability of the private player is in question with the increase of price and the problem of land. Land is actually making the project cost increase by 5%. Okay. So that is there, and then obviously, so that need to be studied in detail. And we, of course, the less time we had, we could not have access to a lot of private players and their documentation. And obviously, how this land bank portal is going to affect the entire scheme, that has to be seen. And of course, farmers, a detailed survey has to be done for the farmers with the control group to basically assess whether the farmers are actually benefiting from the scheme. And one of the major flaw we found that only 5% farmers we interviewed, they are aware about this scheme. So obviously farmers were to be insulated from the scheme, but they should know about the scheme so that they would expect that they would get a consistent amount of supply during the daytime, which once they expect that, they would demand for that, right? If they don't know about the scheme, obviously they would not demand that. So that in that front, actually, there was a suggestion from our study that the distribution company need to put some effort towards making this making this awareness drive possibly the farmers.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. There is a competition going on between Sky and this Maharashtra intervention. But it is to be noted that the Maharashtra intervention is 8 times bigger than Sky. 700 megawatt versus just 70, 80, 90 megawatts of. I think they are racing ahead.
And this is what also inspires the KUSUM
That's right. But there is a lot of research on the table on Sky. But I think IRMA is the only institution which has done this study on the Maharashtra. So I hope that you will kind of stay dug into this and get us more ideas of it. Thank you very much. You now have an online presentation from Agriculture.
Hi, I think you need to enable screen sharing for me as a participant.
Yeah. Anjali, you have 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Starting now.
Can you enable it so that I can share my screen? It's still disabled for me. Or you can present it and I can tell you which slides to change to as well.
Yeah. So you are allowing to see. Just give me a share screen. Share screen. Yeah, you can share it now.
Yeah. Great. Great. Very interesting evidence on Sky from Deepak and Sonal and on MSK from Hippu. I'm just going to dive right into our presentation here. So we know that various interventions are currently being implemented in India to improve farmers' income. Through a lot of our own work, we're trying to understand how can you create win-wins by improving farmers' income while at the same time managing some of our water resources sustainability. And the challenge in India is that we have to address the Goldilocks dilemma, which is basically that half of India's farmers are rain-fed, which means that they don't have enough irrigation water to earn enough money, while on the other hand, some have access to too much irrigation, and it ends up over-exploiting some of our groundwater resources. And often both types of farmers, both the rain-fed farmers as well as the over-abstracting irrigated farmers coexist in the same village. Now, we know that 60% of Indian farmers use groundwater for irrigation. And to access this groundwater, there are two major energy sources that have been traditionally used. One is grid-connected electricity, and the other one in remote regions particularly, we have diesel pump sets. Now, the first one, that is grid-connected electricity, has often resulted in depletion of groundwater since farmers get subsidized or almost fully free electricity that then allows them to mostly grow water-guzzling crops. The second one has a heavy carbon footprint since these diesel pump sets are highly polluting to the atmosphere. Now, it is in this context that solar irrigation has been introduced in India. Now, solar irrigation actually serves two different purposes. In grid-connected regions, it acts as a demand-side intervention. In that, with the introduction of feed-in tariffs and net meterings, they have the ability to reduce groundwater abstraction and to use water resources more sustainably. That is the hypothesis. And farmers are offered a feed-in tariff with net metering that forces them to choose between either selling the electricity back to the grid or pumping more groundwater. Now, as a supply-side intervention, solar irrigation is placed in limited or no access to grid-connected electricity regions, and it allows farmers to access groundwater where they did not previously have access to any electricity at all. And in India, as we all know, is being introduced through the PM KUSUM scheme. And what we are interested in understanding is what the impact of the competency of PM KUSUM is and what trade-offs farmers are likely to make in the different regions that they operate in. Now, like I said earlier, we are interested in mostly understanding the implications of solar irrigation for groundwater depletion. And this is often tricky because it requires us to understand both the groundwater demand and groundwater supply. Groundwater demand is often complex to plot because there are, as we know, like no formal marketplaces, although it is there in like very specific regions of the country. It's not the norm for most places of the country. And we often make inferences on the groundwater demand based on what farmers grow and sell. On the other hand, groundwater supply depends on the hydrogeological nature of the region. And for this, we try to understand this through the aquifer types of the region. So in this slide, you can see that there are two broad categories of aquifers. One is what we call bathtub aquifers, which is what we see in regions in alluvial aquifer systems in India. And here, each individual's farmer's pumping capacity has relatively little impact on another farmer's capacity. On the other hand, we have what are called egg carton aquifers, and these are similar to the hard rock regions in peninsular India. And here the aquifers are more fast responding and local as well. To make the situation a little more complicated, there's currently no way to estimate what a sustainable yield is. And this is likely to vary depending on a number of factors, including the type of aquifer, rainfall, and other sources of recharge as well. In the current regime, what we are calling like where free electricity or subsidized electricity is offered to farmers, we're calling that a rationing regime, which is basically that the number of hours of pumping is limited for farmers. So that determines the quantity of water a farmer can pump, and there's an upper limit for that. So a farmer will be able to pump as much water as is possible during those hours when electricity is available so that he or she can maximize his income. And what we really want to do is move towards a pricing system, and that's what solar irrigation offers us by providing like a feed-in tariff with net metering, so that farmers can make a very deliberate choice between either pumping more or selling that electricity back to the grid. Now, how do we evaluate the impact of solar irrigation on groundwater? Now, there are three challenges with current methods to study farmers' choices and the collective impact will have on groundwater irrigation. One is like a purely empirical approach. Using a purely empirical approach, what will happen, and to understand how farmers will actually respond, is that it may not be predictive of how farmers might actually respond in different geographies. And this is useful after implementing a scheme, but we need to have some sense of what farmers' choices are likely to be even before implementing a scheme. The second one is under current policy design, which most of you have shown through your experience with Sky and MSKVY. They're often what we call gold-plated schemes, which means that the subsidies are quite high, and the farmer's own buy-in into the scheme is almost like very low, like 5% or so. And we need to have a better understanding of how farmers' behaviors are likely to be when there are less favorable conditions available to them. The third one is that much of the available data right now is on short-term responses, and the real effects of any scheme like solar irrigation will only be felt if it induces cropping pattern shift in decadal timescales. So what we decided to do was we decided to apply an agent-based modeling approach to understand farmer choices. What are they likely to be in different geographies in India? So for each type of farmer, we laid out the agent's behavior in different circumstances, often as a set of what we call condition action rules. So here, as you can see, the regional constraints on the left is basically a land, water, and energy framework, which I'll come to on the next slide. And that determines the kinds of constraints that are available to the farmer. Superimposed on top of the regional constraints are the policy design. That is how much subsidies are available to them, what is the extent of subsidies, and what are the feed-in tariff rates currently available to them. And against these, what are the agent, we determine the agent constraints based on both this. And we try to understand what are agent transitions likely to be, both for irrigated farmers as well as rain-fed farmers in a particular region. We've listed down some broad categories of the types of transitions farmers are likely to make after the introduction of solar irrigation. They could be a solar farmer. They could switch to either like a more intensive or less intensive crop, a water intensive crop, or they could like improve their water use efficiency, and all of these are likely. Now, when we take the individual farmer responses and add them up, we arrive at the collective impact of these choices on the aquifer of the region and the region's groundwater sustainability. This is how we have applied the ABM for understanding the impact of solar irrigation. Now, coming to the regional constraints, For each of the different case studies that we have studied, we have included 3 constraints, that is electricity or energy, water availability, and land constraint. And this will help us understand like what choices, what agent choices are likely to be available for the farmer. And for each of these different constraints, these are the indicators that we've used based on multiple government data sets to identify the most dominant constraint in that region and what impact that is likely to have on the farmer's choice itself. What we're really trying to understand through all of this is how farmers' choices are likely to be determined based on these transitions. What would it take to enable a sustainable transition? A sustainable transition we are defining as one where both farmers' income are either the same or more than before, is low on risk, both price-related risk and cultural risk, and has low impact on groundwater resources. Multiple papers have shown that farmers' decisions are made on market prices and volatility of those prices, with most farmers being risk averse and choosing to grow crops with low volatility and steady market demand. So really what we want to do is help them to move from this point here, which is like a low profit, high irrigation water requirement situation, to a high profit, low irrigation water requirement situation. So what would it take for them to move from here to here? These are the case studies that we have explored. These case studies are quite sort of broad in terms of each of them have different types of constraints that are associated with them. We picked Bathinda and Punjab, West Champaran and Bihar, Bengaluru rural Karnataka, Anand Gujarat, Botar Gujarat, Nadia and West Bengal. So we were to broadly categorize the types of constraints some of these regions have. Bathinda mostly has like a land-related constraint because most of the region is already fully irrigated. West Champaran is slightly energy constrained, although most of the state is fully electrified. There are still regions in the state that use diesel pump sets for electricity. Then you have Bengaluru rural, which is mostly water constrained because it's in hard rock aquifer region. Anand is partially land constrained, not fully. Botad is mostly water constrained, and Nadia is energy constrained.
Anjali, you have 5 minutes left.
Yeah, thank you so much. Almost there. So these are the steps that we have used to construct our agent-based models. We've tried to understand the district characteristics, develop the agent profiles, then estimated the irrigation water requirement, the economic benefits for different crops and the risk associated with them, and then superimposed all of this and then done some external consultations to understand like what is to predict likely transitions, and then aggregated it at scale to understand the impact on groundwater sustainability. So now we come to the first case study. So there are 2 dominant farmers in Punjab, in Bathinda, Punjab. One is a rice wheat farmer. So in Bathinda, Punjab, 80% of the current farmers are rice wheat farmers. That is, they grow rice in Kharif and wheat during the Rabi season. This is a cotton potato farmer. These are the other types of farmers available in this region. There's a cotton potato farmer and there's a quinoa farmer. That's 2% of the farmers grow quinoa in Bathinda. Now, if you were to introduce solar irrigation for a rice wheat farmer in Bathinda, Punjab, these are the impact that you're likely to see. Now, if the rice wheat farmer were to switch to cotton potato, you can see that there's a 52% increase in income. And this 52% increase in income is accounting for both the income from sale of crop cultivation as well as income from sale of energy back to the grid. That is the feed-in tariff. We have assumed a rate of 5 rupees per kilowatt hour over here. So for a cotton potato farmer, there's an increase in income. If the farmer were to switch to quinoa, there's an increase in income. There's a marginal increase in income if he or she continues growing rice wheat. In terms of the irrigation water requirement, there's a substantial decrease in irrigation water requirement, both from switching to cotton potato as well as to quinoa, as you can see from these 2 graphs. Whereas there's no change in irrigation water requirement if the farmer were likely to grow rice and wheat. In terms of risk assessment, there are 2 kinds of risks, as we said. So price-related risk and cultural risk. Cultural risk is basically, it's low if the farmer continues growing the same crop because he or she doesn't have to acquire any additional knowledge to grow and cultivate the new crop. Whereas the cultural risk is very high if the farmer has to switch to a new crop. Price-related risk for MSP crops, the price-related risk is very low. Whereas for non-MSP crops, the price-related risk is high because of volatility associated with open markets. So based on our models, where we said that farmers likely to choose an option which either keeps the income at the same level or increases it. At the same time, the risk associated with it is low. The farmer is and based on stakeholder consultations as well, the farmer is likely to continue growing rice wheat in a place like Punjab, Bathinda, Punjab, because it's the least risky option. Second agent farmer is the cotton potato farmer. This is a very interesting study. Now, 18% of the remaining farmers in Bathinda grow cotton and potato. So as you can see, there's an increase in income if the farmer continues growing cotton and potato, whereas there's a decrease in income if the farmer were to switch to either quinoa or rice wheat, because the market prices are such for these three different crops. And there's no change in IWR if they grow cotton wheat, and reduced water consumption for quinoa and increased water consumption. So this is
You have 2 minutes left.
yeah, most likely profitable option and least risky as well. Now, if we were to aggregate these results at the district level for Punjab, for Bathinda, you can see that before solar irrigation is introduced, is a highly unsustainable situation in terms of groundwater exploitation status. And we see that the most likely outcome is that they continue to grow what they're growing, and which means that it's continuing to it's going to continue to remain unsustainable. So for a really sustainable transition, what we need is a substantial number of percentage of farmers to move to citrus crops like quinoa, which are likely to have an impact on irrigation water requirement. There are multiple implications for our project here, but I think the one thing that I really want to focus on is this third point regarding moving from a rationing regime to a pricing regime. Now, even though electricity is fully free or subsidized, there is some element of control on rationing because the state governments typically give 6 to 8 hours of energy per day. Now, this rationing system sets an informal limit to the amount of water farmers can extract. However, these limits do not take into consideration the biophysical constraints that already exist in this region. For instance, farmers in Punjab could use a 10 HP pump to draw water from its shallow tubules, whereas in counterparts in Karnataka will require much higher pump capacity size. So drawing water in Punjab and Karnataka are going to look very, very different. The challenge we have in the current rationing regime is that while fixing the number of hours of electricity supply, we still don't know the demand for water. And this tends to be highly variable, which means that the pricing also ends up being highly variable. The variable demand and pricing end up resulting in extraction of quantities of water that are currently unsustainable for the specific region. So if we were to move to like solar irrigation, which provides us the opportunity to introduce a pricing regime, there's an opportunity cost for water that we're introducing here. And this allows farmers to consider economically feasible alternatives and also allows government to tide over the political infeasibility of ever getting rid of these purpose incentives that agricultural electricity subsidized offers. But to enable this, transition, I think solar irrigation alone will be insufficient. And we'll need an entire set of systemic changes to ensure that the current production practices can break the lock-ins that we have in agriculture. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Anjali. Neither pricing nor rationing can actually give us a handle on groundwater. I think that was the main takeaway from this presentation. We have a last presentation by Nikunj on the nuts and bolts of the capacity building of farmers in Gujarat. So Nikunj, you have 10 minutes. Do we have a soft copy of this, Nikunj? Yes, sir. Perhaps we can just share a link to some of our friends from Nepal and Bangladesh might want to speak. Sure. Okay.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Myself, Nikunj Justadiya. I'm representing Gujarat Energy Research and Management Institute. Basically, if I'm talking, I will tell you something about my institute. We are a center of excellence in solar energy, and we are a part of Gujarat State Petroleum Corporation, a state PSU under government of Gujarat. So now we are talking about Sky, right, since the first session itself. But if I'm talking about the on-ground implementation of Sky and how it seems on paper, the scenario is actually different. If I'm talking about the Sky's perspectives from a farmer's perspective, on paper, we are looking at the numbers that it is a very promising scheme. And as an engineer, I will also say that from farmers' perspective, it is a very revolutionary scheme because 7 rupees a unit is a very huge number. But if we talk about the on-ground implementation of the scheme, are the farmers satisfied with the scheme? Let us have a look at it. Next slide, please. So we have already seen this is basically the overview of Sky. The numbers represent launched by government of Gujarat in 2018. Around 93 agricultural feeders of whole Gujarat are covered under Sky. This 93 are shared under 4 discoms. We'll talk in detail about that. Around 4,520 beneficiary farmers comprising of these 93 feeders. And these 4,520 farmers are distributed among the 4 electricity distributed companies. We will talk in detail about how many number of farmers are covered under what discoms. And 70% farmers willingness criteria. These numbers we know. Why 70% was kept? Because it was technically not possible to cover the feeders to sky if a certain amount of farmers or a certain number of farmers are not willing to or are not agreeing to adopt the sky. So that is why the 70% criteria was adopted. And this 70% criteria was a very challenging factor for the discoms, because the farmers were not ready to install, were not ready to believe, that they were in the dilemma that how this going to act, or how this going to adapt, or how they are going to adapt this scheme, and how they'll be benefited from this scheme. Next, please. These numbers we know on paper, right? We are talking these numbers since morning. That 30% capital financial assistance from Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, 5% down payment from farmers, remaining feed-in tariff 3.5 rupees per unit, evacuation-based incentives 3.5 rupees. This we know numbers, but I have met around 2,000 farmers of 44 feeders of Gujarat. So we are doing a capacity building program on ground at their feeders. And about these numbers, the way we know these numbers, they are not actually aware about this. They are of the fact, they believe that they are getting 60% direct subsidy, 60% cut in the cost, but the actual subsidy clause is that they are getting 30% direct subsidy, and remaining 30% they are getting as evacuation based incentives. So they are not aware about the fact. The most problem I am facing, the majority of the problems I am facing by meeting them, is that they believe that the government told them that you will be getting 60% subsidy, and we are only getting 30%. So we are being fraud by the government. So these types of issues are happening on ground levels. Next, please. Now, what is the need for training these farmers? Designing a scheme on paper, designing policy is a different thing, and on ground implementation is a different thing. I've already told, right? These are the issues. To enhance the power generation and capacity utilization factor, this scheme, the government has invested a lot, around 800 crores of money for this scheme. But the money invested is justified? If we talk about the on-ground implementation, the scenario is very, very different. As I already told, the scheme that has been designed on paper level is not actually implemented with that particular level that they should be benefited in actual reason. Power generation is very less. CUF, they have to maintain 18% as per the clause. As per the policy, 18% CUF must be maintained, but the CUF is not maintained 18% in 60% of the feeders. The reasons are different. As I already said, that the scheme is very much effective, or the farmers have benefited in Uttar Gujarat Wijaya Company Limited. If I'm talking about the 4 discoms, Paschim Gujarat, Uttar Gujarat, Madhya Gujarat, and Southern Gujarat. So these are the 4 discoms. UGVCL farmers are earning maximum money. 95% of farmers are earning money from UGVCL, and the major problems are there in DGVCL and MGVCL, Central Gujarat and Southern Gujarat. Why? The reasons are different. They are not earning money. Only 2 technical reasons are possible. First reason is the number of units that should have been generated from solar are not getting generated, and the second reason is they are using, or they are operating pumps more than requirement. So these are the only 2 reasons possible. And in case of Southern Gujarat and Central Gujarat, the second reason is more prompt, right? Lack of knowledge about solar PV systems among farmers. They are not aware what are the kind of components installed in their system, what are the warranties of those components, how to maintain those components, what kind of faults that may occur in their systems. They are completely blank. They are even not going to their systems. This is the real scenario, on-ground implementation scenario of this particular scheme. Lack of awareness about systems operation and maintenance aspect. Cleaning. Yeah, sure. Please, next. So these are the kind of scenarios, right? So they are not focusing on cleaning purpose. These burning issues are electrical shocks. Some farmers have got the burning issues. They have got the casualties. Next, please. They are covering the inverters. They are not having technical knowledge about the components. So these things must not happen technically. They are keeping those clothes and other things around. So these things at their levels has impacting technology much. They are not having this particular knowledge. So these types of things are happening at the ground level. Please, next. Next, please. Yeah, previous one. So thefts in the DGVCL, Southern Gujarat, the incidents of thefts are more. So these kind of systems are there. So you can see what is the use of this particular systems technically, but they are not focusing. They are not even knowing about what kind of impact these types of things will have on their system. Next, please. 22 feeders of PGVCL, Western Gujarat, 10 feeders of UGVCL, 8 of DG and 8 of MG. Total 48 feeders are to be covered. Maximum 45 farmers we are training per batch. Total 70 batches are designed, and out of those 70, we have already covered 62 batches. 8 batches are remaining to be trained, and we'll be doing that in coming days. Next, please. We have designed a maintenance manual. This is the manual we have covered. Right, you can see it after this session. I will show you, and I will also share the PDF of this particular link. We have kept. Yeah, please next, please. It will be covered. So this is the schedule we are training. The 4 main sessions we have kept. Pre-training survey to know what kind of knowledge or how much, what extent of knowledge they are aware about before training. Components of solar system, operation and maintenance. Usage of Sky mobile application, a very good application is designed for farmers, in which they can use or they can see directly how much units they are generating, how much units they are selling, and reading the electricity bill. Electricity bills, they are not totally aware about how the bills are formed, and they do not have any specific knowledge about that. So we are telling them or giving knowledge about this particular things. Next, please. So this is one of the screenshot or snapshot of the training that we are doing. Next, please. Around 1,650 farmers I have trained till now in 44 feeders of Gujarat, and around 350 farmers are remaining in the next 8 batches. So the target was 2,000 farmers, and we are very near to it. Next, please. Yeah, this is the important things. Farmers findings and the farmers reviews on the capacity building program. How are they reacting to it, and how this has impacted? Farmers were not aware about the system parts, warranties, insurance, maintenance contract, that they are getting knowledge from this particular training program. Farmers got to know about their rights and responsibilities. Farmers were unaware about the impact of running their pumps without need. In MGVCL, they are operating their pumps round the clock, 365 days, 12 hours. No crops require that much amount of pumping water, but they are running because the reason is different there. Farmers got to know about the importance of regular cleaning of modules, CUF and other technical parameters. Farmers got to know about the functioning and faults that may occur in the different components of the system. 70% of farmers either didn't know about or didn't use the Sky mobile application. They were not aware that this kind of application is available for them. So we have installed in their mobiles, and we make sure that they will be using it in next. Most of the farmers were not clear. Just a minute. Most of the farmers were not clear about the bill. Most of the farmers believe the tariff charged by Discom per unit was 3.5. That's why they were considering that this amount of bills are they are getting. Lakhs, 10 lakhs. I have seen the maximum amount of bill is 11 lakh rupees for a farmer. Because that was not because of the tariff. That was because of the loan component. They are not aware about that. Farmers got to know clear picture about the loan component of the scheme after this training, and farmers got the detailed information about the right channels to use for complaints. Next, please. Most of the farmers were not aware about the impact of shadow. That what kind of impact a shadow could create on their system. Farmers were very well satisfied with the quality and content of the training. In 44 feeders, I can assure you that with guarantee I can tell that in all the 44 feeders, they have told us that you are bit late. This training, this type of training should have been given earlier. There's just 2 minutes videos.
1 minute.
Yeah. Next, please. This is just a video of this glimpses that what we are doing in the training. Is it running? Yeah.
The sound is not.
No, it is just music. So this is the pre-training survey. How much knowledge they have before training.
We also collect data on the farmers' feedback.
We have the feedback. This is of the Ashapuri.
Oh, you checking?
Music check. Very loud. Actually, what happening is that they are not getting ample amount of help from both discoms as well as the installation agencies. 90% feeders are having issues with the installation agencies maintenance.
Okay. Thanks, Nikunj.
Yeah, it's done.
Keep watching your video. Meanwhile, I think session, and I would like to congratulate all the 5 speakers. I think all of them deserve more time than we could provide. I mean, the presentations were so dense, there's so much on every slide. Indeed, it is more like 45 minutes of presentation. But thank you very much. I think